돕쇼. 도제 상기 공판유 돕쇼. And let's do the 4 limitless contemplations, 4 immeasurables. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness which can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal impartial compassion, free of worldly bias towards friends and enemies. Sem jendam je dewatang dewe jutang den pa juchik, dungal tang dungal chichu tang trawa juchik, dungal mepe dewa tampa tang mindra wa juchik, nearing chak tang ni tang trawe tang nom chempola ne pa juchik. So good morning in this 2026 year. I hope that it's going to be the most enlightening year for all of you. Some of us are getting on in age, so it better be more enlightening, I think, So as I said, butt in whenever you want to, because I did the topic, if I were a Buddha, how would I behave? And I'm going to explain to you why I chose that. But of course, I took a text with it of Dajjam Rinpoche so that I could really put in some beautiful teaching while giving you all my own experiences, which were quite heavily in samsara. But before we start, I just want to do 2 stories for you. You might know these stories, but it doesn't matter. They set the tone of the whole teaching of if I were a Buddha, and of course you are a Buddha. In ancient Chinese literature, the eternal venerable mother sent down to earth 96 myriads of her children who were original Buddhas and immortals. Once on earth, they forgot their true home in paradise and became attached to fame and profit and sensual pleasures. Following their desires, they became trapped in samsara, the sea of suffering. The great law required them to repeatedly die, what a waste, and be reborn and recognize the impermanent nature of their goals. The venerable mother grieved for her children. She sent messengers to remind the children of their lost nature and the way back home. The messengers were Buddhas. They prophesied that at the end, the mother's children will experience wholeness and she will be united with them in paradise. But meanwhile, they have to endure great suffering because they've forgotten who they really are, and ignorance pervades samsara. And you've just got to look at all the suffering at the moment on the earth plane, and then you know exactly what's happening. So the hymn of the Pearl story is the story of a king and queen who lived in a faraway, beautiful land. One day they noticed that the divine pearl of their land, which was called the wish-fulfilling jewel, had disappeared. They told their son, the prince, that he had to go and find the pearl and he would have to get past the loud-breathing serpent, very loud breathing, in order to reobtain this wish-fulfilling jewel. They told him that he would inherit the whole kingdom if he succeeded in his mission. Once on his journey, he forgets his mission and sinks into a deep sleep for a very long time. The king and queen become very concerned that he's not returned, and they write him a letter and send it in the form of an eagle, in which they ask him to remember his true origin and purpose. The eagle alights beside the prince and turns into speech. At its voice, the prince arises from his deep sleep and remembers he is the king's son, and he longs for his true nature and home. After a long suffering journey, he lulls the serpent to sleep by chanting the divine names of his divine parents. He rescues the pearl, returns to his parents, and receives the inheritance of the whole kingdom. He has become the awakened one. But remember, he always was the awakened one. He just forgot. And you're the awakened ones, and you've just forgotten. And the second story that I want to do, I used the story last year, but it's very relevant, because the first thing is our forgetting who we are. The second story's got a different moral. Once Milarepa was challenged by a black magician of the pre-Buddhist faith of Tibet. He challenged Milarepa that through his magic power, he would be able to reach the summit of Mount Meru. Miller replied that he could do the same. Let us see, said the magician, who will reach it first. And he started to climb up. It was very early in the morning. The sun had not yet risen, and Miller said he would rest a little. Those who'd been present when the magician challenged him grew worried and implored him to hurry after his adversary. He was unruffled and didn't move from his rest. The magician was almost at the top of Mount Meru, Mount Kailash, and was jeering at Miller when the first ray of the sun touched the summit of the holy mountain. Miller had been waiting for this moment. Through the mighty power of his concentration, he immediately became one with the ray, and he just rode the ray right up to the mountain. Before the magician realized what had happened, the figure of Milarepa appeared at the top of the Mount Meru or Kailash. Hello, he called out to the magician who was panting and puffing below him. Don't exert yourself. And the magician, who saw himself defeated, got such a shock that he dropped his magic drum, the damaru. It let down in big bounds, and each time it bounced against the ice dome of Kailash, it emitted a loud tone and left a deep cut in the surface of the dome. Ting, tang, tang it went, to the great hilarity of all the onlookers. And up to the present day, a perpendicular line of stair-like impressions are to be seen, forming a vertical axis on the southern face of the dome of Kailash. Now, what's the moral of this story? The moral of the other one is we've forgotten. The moral of this one is the difference between surrendering to your Buddha nature, your awakened nature, or making a great effort with your human conceptual mind to reach the summit. The steps created by the magician's drum are significant. Firstly, the magician came from an ego base, which was to win and defeat. The steps show that the only progress with Sem is the step-by-step gradual process where the other is instantaneous, spontaneously effortless, just being in the view at the top. Now, this is very important for my subject matter because it's really hard to have the conduct of a Buddha. And since I was doing this talk, I've been working very hard, still with effort, to say, how would a Buddha behave in this situation? What would the Buddha's conduct be? And let me tell you, I had failed the test many, many times, okay? But I've also passed some of the things. And I realized that what Dajjom Rinpoche says is it's got to be familiarization with the conduct. You have to familiarize yourself before it starts becoming second nature. Now, Miller had developed and developed and developed, so he could just take the sunbeam up to the top of the mountain. And I'd love it if we could, but of course we can't. But the point is, those are my 2 points I want to make. And then I just want to give you Dajjom Rinpoche's his little quote, which says, if there is partiality, remember partiality means you like this instead of this. You prefer this person to this. You prefer nice things to horrible things. If there is partiality, it is not the view. Because if you really get to the view, which we're going to discuss, if you really get to the view, there's no partiality. Whatever is there is exactly what you are going to accept. Hello, Janine. And he says, if there are reference points, now we all want reference points. How do I do this? How do I do that? If there are reference points, it's not the meditation, view, meditation, conduct, and fruition. If there are reference points, it is not the meditation. But it's okay if you take reference points in the beginning, fine, but it's not the meditation. He says, if there's a mere outward show, It's not conduct. So am I doing an outward show? Probably. But eventually I'm going to let it go for sure, because I'm doing it all the time. If there's hope and pretentiousness, it's not the result. If there's hope and pretentiousness, it is not the result. So it's really important to understand that. He says this fresh state of present awareness, unspoiled by dualistic thoughts, effortlessly sustained in the natural state, is Buddha Kuntazangpo's wisdom mind. Do not hope or fear for good and bad outcomes. Regardless of what formulation of thought occurs, they arise and are liberated simultaneously. Their essence nature is empty awareness, reach that unmoving, unassailable state. Now, we can actually go to him and we can argue. That's all very well in theory, okay? It's all very well in theory till you're stuck, right in the midst of samsara. Now, this trip that I had to samsara, because it was my grandson's wedding and everything, so everything was, everybody came, every relative, sisters, brothers, aunties, cousins, everybody came from everywhere, and my feet were deep in samsara, okay, really deep in samsara. Then that terrible event happened at Bondi with the shooting and everything. And it's quite interesting because I did manage to meet the girls, not you, Betty, but I met all the others in Australia. But you know what? That terrible, fateful day, actually, when I look back, and I don't know whether you Australian girls want to say anything about it, but that terrible, fateful day, which actually happened 3 days or 4 days before the wedding. So there was a real dampener on the whole city. The whole of Sydney was in such a bad way from these shootings. But at the same time, something woke up. So even if you look at things without partiality or with partiality, something woke up. There was definitely a feeling in the whole city. And I don't know if you Australian girls can feel that. There was a feeling. Jews and non-Jews alike all brought the flowers and sat there and did meditations and did prayers and did everything for all the people. And lots of people were really, really traumatized. Children too, really traumatized, because, there's this beautiful, probably one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, and very fashionable and everything. And there's everybody on the beach, and the Jews having their Hanukkah service, and suddenly these two terrorists in the middle of nowhere are standing on top of a bridge and just shooting. So there were lots of children that needed counseling afterwards because they were right in the middle of the shooting and people jumped on top of them. It was really a ghastly event, but I wondered to myself what it was really about. Anyway, everybody got up and went on with everything. But for me, my December experience was up to my eyeballs in samsaric experience, even though divine in many other ways, but really up to the neck. And I was forced to ask this question to myself: how would a Buddha behave when I was exhausted and worn out from the samsara? I was exhausted when I came back. Only then did I realize a little bit of this answer. It really is the answer as to how we can be deeply in samsara, as a lot of our karma determines we have to be, and still have the conduct of a Buddha. And I'm going to go into many different teachings of what the conduct of a Buddha is, and you can argue with me because I really want you to understand it. But a lot of my answers to this question are explained and understood from the commentary on Dajjam his text called The Illumination of Primordial Wisdom. Okay, so I'm not taking it just from me, but I'm going to give you a lot of my own experiences to help you along. But he writes it in a book by Alan Wallace called Dzogchen, and they put Dzogchen with a K. And I'm not concerned about that. That's really is a very good, very thick book, but don't even venture in it unless you're really ready, because it's very deep and very involved and all of that kind of thing. But I'm going to take it. But firstly, on this trip, when all my family from everywhere in the world were present for my grandson's wedding, various members were moaning. They hadn't had enough time with me. The kids were blaming me for various things. As you know, when these big events take place, everybody's busy blaming and shaming and whatever. And I had to listen to a lot of criticism that this one said about that one and that one said about this one. Then coming home, I think both Joss and I were both very, very exhausted, jet lag, and he was pointing fingers at me. We were irritating each other, saying I always complained and always asking him to do things. And I came into my beautiful shrine room, which I'm in now, and quite upset and feeling sorry for myself. And then suddenly this question popped into my head. How would a Buddha conduct himself if all sorts of blaming words were thrust upon him? He wouldn't be blaming others like I was, but how would he behave? And I realized he would never see it as upsetting and overwhelming, but I'm a Buddha, and so are you. And so we just haven't realized it. So we are acting as a sentient being. And you'll see in this book that Alan Wallace and Dudgeon Rinpoche take the fact that there isn't really a sentient being. And I'm going, oh my God, then what are we? We actually are Buddhas. We just play acting sentient beings. Now, when you get to understand this, there are many, many things you could do. And Dzongsa Khyentse said, he was teaching on a sutra called the Good Eon. Why the Good Eon, even though so much trauma on this planet? Because 1002 lotuses will appear in this kalpa. 1002 Buddhas who will bring all the teachings of awakening. Dzongsa said, the Buddha asked many questions at the beginning of the sutra. What were his questions? How can a bodhisattva understand the different perceptions of all beings? Now, there I am, and each being, and they're all my family, they're my close family, lots of them, very close. And here the Buddha asked the question, how could we understand the different perceptions of all beings? Can we understand the different perceptions of all beings? Secondly, how can they have real compassion? How can we have real compassion?
Do we need to understand the perception of all beings?
Yes, 100%, because that's where the compassion comes in. That's beautiful you asked that. We need to understand the perception of all beings, because if you look at someone who's attacking you, even with words, or being nasty to you, or pointing fingers at you, you might also be pointing back. If you see the true perception of that person, and I'm going to talk about it, your whole attitude changes. Your view changes.
But if our response comes from a part of wisdom and compassion, is that not Buddha behavior?
Yeah, that is Buddha behavior. But we're so steeped in samsara as sentient beings, we don't have that. Yes, Buddha behavior, the Buddha, every single person that came to the Buddha, he actually was compassionate. Even if he didn't agree with their viewpoint, he still was compassionate. And let me just tell you that Lama Yeshe Rinpoche, what he always says to me when I'm arguing with him, when he says this and this and this, and then I'm arguing with him, and I wrote the words down this morning so I could remember, he goes, and yet, Melanie, now write those two words, and yet, okay? Because what he's saying is he's not disagreeing with me. He's not disagreeing. He's saying, and yet, there's another viewpoint. So when somebody goes, oh, yes, the Buddha would go, oh, yes, I perfectly understand you. And yet, and then he gives you the truth. But he hasn't said, you're an idiot and you don't understand what you're doing. He's just said, and yet, there's another viewpoint. Now just think of that word. And it's so interesting because when I came home and I was talking to my daughter, who really managed beautifully with the wedding and all the relatives and all the functions and all the breakfasts and all the everything, she really managed beautifully. So she was complaining to me about this one and this one and this one. And I used that. I said, and yet, when you look at it in a different way, maybe you could have a different perception of it. It's so important. So anyway, she was arguing with me still on the phone. And then I didn't hear from her for a while. And then she phoned me. And then she actually said, you know, Mom, I haven't contacted this person, but I intend to fully. So I thought, good, she got the message, you know, because I kept saying, and yet, if you look deeply at this person's behavior, it's very different to your perception of it, your human perception. So how would a Buddha conduct himself? So he says, the Buddha says, how can we have real compassion? And how can the Buddha perform enlightened activities? Now, when we talk about enlightened activities, it's so fascinating. I mean, each enlightened activity is another whole subject for a whole lecture, because we should be performing enlightened activities, but we're not. We're performing the opposite of enlightened activities. And he says, in the end, it is only a state of a Buddha mind that is able to enact all of this. So for me, you know, I thought, how would a Buddha conduct himself if all sorts of blaming words were thrust on him, which they were many, many times? I realized he would never see it as upsetting and overwhelming. So we see it as upsetting and overwhelming because we are acting as though the sentient being were our full potential. And meanwhile, in Alan Wallace and Dajjom Rinpoche's book, they actually dispute that a sentient being even exists. So it's a very interesting thing. So could we start acting as a Buddha, an awakened being, even before fully realizing this? Could we? Even if we revert back to the old patterns, we can quickly push ourselves back, shake ourselves back. And, you know, if any of you ever watch the talent contests, when they ask the judges, so what's your opinion? You know, some of the judges say, I give you a definite yes. Okay, so when I answered the question, if the person's got talent, I thought, could we realize it? And the answer to this is a definite yes. I know, I've proved it to myself. It doesn't mean we don't go back, but that's the purpose of my whole talk. And it's like, if you do Vajrayana deity practice, but you haven't seen yourself as a deity with those qualities, can you do the practice and benefit without having realized it yet? Like I often say to myself, how would Tara in me react to this? Now, it's very interesting because green Tara was for sure my practice, and your beautiful Beryl, Diana, you know, we were writing to each other at the beginning of the year. So she said, I remember you doing green Tara practice at Cape Mountain Retreat. And she said to me, oh, you've been doing this practice for years. I said, actually, I've only been doing it for 2 weeks. And so she reminded me of that when she was doing, you know, it was so in me. But interestingly enough, that the green Tara action, accomplishment, speed, doing it correctly was very, very, very strong in me. And then suddenly I moved more to white Tara, who is much more placid. She's not on the go. She's a wish-fulfilling wheel, but she's got lots of purity and things. So when I do my Tara Eva, I actually look at both of these and I think how you could shift from that one to that one, a much more inner state where green Tara's got to be there for everybody. So you could use both. Or how would Guru Rinpoche and me behave here? You could start having conduct. That's the third state. Having conduct in alignment with realization even before you've realized it. Now I'm going to give you one more quote from Chantrul Rinpoche, who's coming here to do some lovely retreats. What he says is this: every moment of your life provides an opportunity to practice, no matter where you are or what is happening. Do not keep practice just something that is done in a Dharma center or in front of a shrine or on your meditation seat, but also let the whole world and all that you encounter within it become the training ground for your mind. The more that you do this, the faster you will move on the path to Buddhahood and the happier you will become on the way. So it's very, very interesting. I don't know if anybody wants to comment because I've got lots to teach and I want to take things from this text and I want to show you how he points it out. Now, obviously, in order to be able to at least do some of the conduct, you do need to know the view and the view and the practice, but you don't need to be realized in them to change the conduct. You just have to create awareness in yourself, which is so important. So does anyone want to say anything before I go on? I've got lots and lots of teaching, but for me, it's much more important for you to challenge, to ask, to share, to really everything that you want. Just do it now. Abby, you were always the one that challenged and all of that when you were sitting in the groups. Anyone, or ask, or say, or state. Yeah, David, please.
What's on my mind is the longer road to realization, which so many people in the Buddhist community have taken. All the sutras, all the yanas, the lesser wheel, the greater wheel, people who study the sutras for years and years and go through a much more intense and demanding path to realization. Sometimes I feel that I have imposter syndrome when I'm sitting here trying to apply the nuances of these inner secret tantras and yogas without having done all the hard yards, which there's so many examples of.
How do you know? How do you know you haven't done them?
Well, I did get reborn after all.
You got reborn, but you know what? I think Lama Lena, and you might agree with this, Karen, Lama Lena is so funny because people put up their hands in her group. She's teaching Ati Yoga, Dzogchen, and they say, how do I know if I'm ready for it? How do I know that, that gradual path? So she answers them. She says, if you are excited about it, if it resonates in your bones, then you're ready. If it doesn't, perfect. Nobody's condemning you for it. Just take your slow boat to China. It's really fun. I always have this argument with Martin. He always says to me, Melanie, you're on the fast train to China or wherever it is. He says, I'm on the slow boat. I said, take your time on the slow boat. But you don't know. All I'm telling you is that when I asked Taisitu Rinpoche to give me empowerment on those high levels, I promise you with every bone in my body, I, Melanie, never knew what I was asking for. I did not know. Something in me knew and asked for it like that. And then there was a long poise. And I knew in that poise, I thought, what have I done? What have I done? How could you ask for something you know nothing about? And I watched him, and you know what he was actually doing? Because he took what seemed like an age. I think he was paging through all my records from many lifetimes, because he took a long time looking, penetratingly at me, that made me feel not so comfortable, but that's okay. And then after a while, he suddenly said, okay. Now, clearly, he would never have gave me 2 hours of teaching alone to me. Who gets that from a guy like Taisito? It's a very rare occasion. But trust me, it must have been what I'd done before. Because when he asked me one day when we were talking, he said to me, why don't you come back and come and study to be a Kempo? And he said, and coming to the monastery, you take 14 years to study to be a Kempo. That's a master of, all the philosophy of Buddhism and everything. And I looked at him and I said, no, never. I said to him, rather give me a tiger, grow my hair and let me ride the tiger. It's what's in my blood, David. Do you know what I mean? I can't explain it to you. And if some people say, no, I don't know what she's talking about, that's fine. You just drop it. But if you are somebody that really resonates with this, and I resonated so well that I was powered into practice, when I was in India, I was powered into practice that I never knew myself. And now when I look back, I think that was probably the change of my life, totally and utterly. Changed my whole life and enables me to teach maybe in this way. So think about it. You don't know. You have definitely had many lifetimes. The way you question and your little sharp mind, and you're finding all these places all over the world that teach different things. Don't underestimate yourself. We might have to give you a bit of a kick in this life, but you've got it all in there. You just got to find it again. I think you have found a lot anyway. Anyone else? Now I'm getting hot under the collar because I'm teaching.
So no, it's probably slightly off point, but maybe relevant. You were talking about working initially with the green Tara and then going to the white Tara, and people, there are so many practices one can do. And what is your feeling, or what is the general consensus? Do you find your heart practice and stick with it, or do you find that you move to a different practice at a different time because your needs are different? I'm not saying that one's more right and one's more wrong. It's just...
Yeah, I think both of those are so important. But, I've read some of the great masters who say, if you find a practice you love and you stick with that practice, even the Dorji Chun, if you stick with that for your whole life, you are fine, because you'll get everything out of it. I think my needs are a little bit different because I teach so many people all the time and I answer so many questions. So I've probably got to have a little more experiences with different deities and how they feel for me, but never to forget that when you take that practice, you are integrating that practice into your being. You are changing from a sentient being. That's why, Gail, it's so important to do the practices for a while at least, because you're changing from I'm changing from Melanie to Tara, or from Melanie to Guru Rinpoche. And that makes me have a completely different view. And then when I've got a different view, I respond with a different perception. So it's really, really important. And I would never give up the deity practice in favor of the others. I'll do the others, but I always do the deity practice because for me, it's vital what I've learned. I sat in my shrine room now when I came back. And I did all I could do this last week was morning retreat. And Lamiyeshi said to me, I'd seen him the week before, and he said to me, it's beautiful in your shrine room, which he blessed and everything. He said, that's the perfect place. Just go and do retreat. The only problem in doing it here is that you're at home, so you get all the distraction of home. But I just did the morning practice. And the one morning, I did the medicine Buddha by myself, which I don't do very often. I do it in the group, but I don't do it alone. And it actually blew my mind. Totally and utterly. In fact, Patricia, you visited me after that and sat in there. This whole room was vibrating with blue. I could tangibly feel it, And then I thought, wow, to be able to do the medicine Buddha means you can heal people of all their things. If you are the medicine Buddha, you not only healing physical illness, and that's what I'm going to teach tomorrow night, but healing the mental ailments of all these beings and everything is so important. So for me, doing that practice alone was very important. And I do different practices. I do the chur at night if I'm doing retreat and things like that, because different needs and different things. But I'm telling you now that the masters say that if you do one practice for your whole life, that's fine. Because maybe in that life also, you've come to do what you've come to do in that life. You may have one purpose, spiritually that you've come to do. Mm-hmm. Does that answer the question? So both.
Thank you. No, thank you.
And I remember, who was it that said, one of the masters said, I know who it was. It was Ringu Toku. He said, I think it was him. All of you in the West, you're so addicted. So this becomes fashionable and that becomes fashionable. And then you all do it and you all go, and he says, and then you go, I'm so sorry. You go to Tara. I'm so sorry I haven't done your practice the whole week. I really need to do your practice. He goes, as though Tara's going to be upset if you don't do the practice kind of thing. We look at it dualistically. But meanwhile, it's us. If we haven't done the practice, we're the losers, not Tara or anyone else. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's really, really interesting that. And I just want to say that when I thought the thought of how would a Buddha behave in my shrine room, I realized a lot of things. If someone was picking on you, blaming you, okay, how could those thoughts and words be ugly or nasty when every single thing came out of pure essence? Now ask yourself that question. Somebody's just said a nasty thing to me, but how could it really be a true nasty thing if it comes out? The only thing that comes out of the essence is pure. So how could it be a nasty thing when it came out of the pure essence? Now, it's very interesting, because I'm going to teach you from this how different things come out of different of your consciousness. So the human consciousness, that comes out of it, and it's certainly not true. Those nasty words come out of the human conceptual, and it's not true. But when you go lower to the substrate or alaya consciousness, where your imprints are, the alaya consciousness only create samsara. So whatever comes out of the alaya consciousness, now you might be shocked with this, and we're going to do this in more detail. But this is what Dajjal Rinpoche teaches and Alan Wallace. Out of the alaya consciousness is the perfect creator for samsara. So you need to move deeper to the primordial consciousness in order to create purity and have people see it as purity. I'm not going any more that. I just want to say those ugly words might seem awful, but a Buddha would see and hear them in a pure way, because a Buddha would understand. That's what we're talking about, the perception. A Buddha would understand where that person is coming from. They wouldn't take seriously those words, okay? A Buddha would look at that person with such compassion, because a Buddha would know the truth about that person. That's so interesting, because firstly, the Buddha would know the truth about the nature of the words and the actions. Secondly, those words would go right over him and back into their essence. Right over him and back into their essence. They would have no bearing heavily on him, because he would see that as they come out, they go back over him into their essence again. So he would not start fixating on them like we do. He said, she said, there we go on and on and on, fixating on it. A Buddha wouldn't do that. Thirdly, he would not want to retaliate, but would want with all his heart to soothe the person and bring them back into harmony. What he would be looking at is not the attack on him. He would be looking at the disharmony in this poor creature, and already he would be praying for them to really find the harmony, and he would be pondering, allowing his Buddha nature to soothe them and bring them back into harmony. And fourthly, he would absolutely know that this whole drama was empty of any substance. We don't. We see the drama. We fixate on it. We're sitting and meditating, and our mind goes back to it and back to it and back to it. And then we pick it up, and then we analyze it, and then we don't know whether to respond or not. Whatever, we carry on and on and on. And what I want to say is this week, which was, I suppose, lovely, not enough time, but at least I had 5 or 6 hours in the morning. I was doing Chenrezi alone in my shrine room, also very deeply. All the practices, because I had so little time that I had to actually really do the practices with real concentration, which I really don't often do. And I thought to myself, I stopped and I thought, Chenrezi in me, what really is compassion? What is it? Wow, the answers started flowing. There's no you and me. There's no dependence on the particular circumstances. Just a deep feeling about this person's whole motivation, about their struggle, about how they're struggling, about their pain. You'd actually have that whole thing about their pain and their suffering if you were a Buddha, and you are a Buddha. So maybe when someone's insulting you or something, maybe you start looking inwards at yourself if you want to have the conduct, if I were a Buddha. So he would see the anger. What he would see is when the anger, the ugly words are coming out, he would actually see mirror-like wisdom. He didn't need the mirror-like wisdom, but he would see the anger from one to another, that the one who's getting the anger has got to be able to see the mirror-like wisdom on that side rather than the anger on the bottom. Because that anger is really, he would know, in truth, he would know that everything that is expressed from the essence is really from the essential creative force, is wisdoms or kayas. Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya. It's any of those or the 5 wisdoms. So when we look at creation, which I really want to do with the illness, those of you that don't manage to come tomorrow evening, watch it, because I think the two will go very well together. Okay. But when you look at the 5 wisdom, out of the essence flows 5 forces. And if you look at the 5 forces that way, They are all the primordial wisdoms. And if you look at them under that way, they anger, jealousy, ignorance, deludedness, all of those things. That's what they are, and that's what we see. So how would a Buddha behave? A Buddha would already see that all the ugly things people are doing or saying, they're not true. It's very, very interesting. Okay, so to be in the state of knowing, a Buddha would simply rest in open, pristine awareness. And we're going to do those meditations here, which has no need, pristine awareness has no need for analyzing, conceptualizing, fixating like I'm doing here, just resting in knowing all this. A Buddha just rests in that view. And then it comes to him how to give that compassion, how to restore that person back to harmony. Remember, everybody. Then I'll stop and tell you what I'm going to do with the meditation. There's the true view, when you can see things as they really are. Then there's the true meditation or practice, which is both creating yourself as the deity and the trekchor, the meditation of being able to cut through all the garbage in our lives and see the pristine awareness. So the true view, the true meditation practice, the true conduct, and the true fruition. So when the Buddha was asked, when someone said to him, and towards the end of his life, how did you manage to teach millions of people over 80 years? I mean, when I think of it, when I think of what effort I put into trying to teach you and trying to get it so that you'll all understand, I mean, could I do it for maybe another 30 years with millions of people? No, I really couldn't. But guess what the Buddha said? He said, there was never any I or me doing activity. It just spontaneously happened through me. Can we allow the spontaneous conduct with an expansive view after a little meditation practice to work, to go towards fruition? This is my question for all of you. And then, of course, in this beautiful book,
I think you have to practice.
Yeah.
You have to be aware every moment.
Okay, but you guys are aware.
Yes.
You are already aware. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting here on a Monday morning with lots of other things to do. Your Monday, but for most people. This is the book that I'm going to teach lots of things from, by Alan Wallace. And this book has amazing things, but in addition to it, in the beginning, he actually has, let me get the page, he has about 20 meditation practices. And apparently on his website, you can actually get these practices where he gives them, which is really nice. So if you want to try and find that, please do, because, you can probably get, just let me see if it says so in the beginning, because it's nice for you to do the practices with him, because he's given about 20 meditations, and I'm going to do a couple with you, because the most important one is how to rest in pristine awareness. But remember, that one comes after. Just mute yourself, Bets. Otherwise.
I have.
No, you haven't.
Okay.
Just mute yourself, because otherwise the camera changes in the videos. Okay, so just remember that what he does right in the beginning of this text of Dajjom Rinpoche is, he starts with that shamatha, okay? And the shamatha is very, very important, because that's what teaches you not to go after the thoughts. But that's only the beginning, the very beginning. So if you need to start there with these meditations, start there if you're still gripping onto your thoughts. Because from the shamatha, you have to go to the vipassana, okay, looking into the mind, studying. You could do it at all different levels. And those two then take you beyond. And, you know, some of the lamas say, if you don't have the two, then it's like having a rocket without any boom to let it go up. You know, you have to do that. But I'm not going to do that in these sessions. I want to really, really, really teach you on what he says and then apply it practically to your lives. Is that okay with all of you? Like that? Are you okay with that? Yeah. Because really, guys, don't be shy to ask questions, no matter how you think this is a small question. I want your small question, because otherwise I can't help you to conduct yourselves as a Buddha, which I'm really trying to learn to do. Anyone else want to say anything? Because it's quite a profound thing, isn't it? I mean, it's quite a profound subject, because if you keep asking yourself, but how would a Buddha behave? But I am a Buddha. How would a Buddha behave? You start seeing everything completely and totally differently. Are you tired, Boone, today? Yeah, I can see. Any questions, any comments, anything? Because I think what we'll do now is we'll do a meditation and then go on. I've got lots of very interesting teaching. Anybody want to comment or say? You all okay? Okay. Then let's do a lovely meditation from this book. And then we'll take it from there. We're going to do resting the mind in its natural state. Okay, so I think it's a beautiful one. I think it combines, it's not far off in, it's just quite near, you know, the beginning things. So it's really okay to do it like that. And so everybody get into your meditation posture. Oh, here is the thing. It's wisdomexperience.org, Alan Wallace, Dzogchen meditation. You'll find it if you Google him. You'll be able to get these meditations and listen to them. I think it's very useful and very helpful. He's very wise. He's a very wise Western teacher, and he likes it to be exactly as it is. So, okay, everybody. Sit in your meditation posture. You're not going to get the sound, but just imagine that I'm gonging the gong. Okay, you won't get the sound till Igor's sorted me out again. You have to. So I'm going to give you the meditation exactly as he gives it. Let your awareness descend into the space of the body, right down to the ground. Settle your body with the qualities of ease, stillness, and vigilance. So you're watching every single part of your body. So check your body as if you were having an out-of-body experience. Simply witness the body breathing without identifying with the body or with the breathing. Just witness your breathing, however it is. I know that Lama Lena always says, breathe in, use your mouth breathing, breathe in through your mouth, let your teeth show, your tongue be free, and then have a bit of a longer out breath. Passively, but alertly observe the flow of the respiration. letting this flow settle in its natural rhythm, effortlessly, without constraint. Relax your awareness so that it settles right where it is, wherever it is. Where it already was before you directed it here and there. Now do not direct it anywhere. Release all grasping and observe your awareness as it settles into stillness. Surrender your identification with the mind, the mental states, and the activities, and unveil the natural luminosity of your awareness. Just imagine, out of this awareness comes your natural luminous absolute expression, colored, bright, vivid, luminous. Rest right there with your awareness, relax, still and clear. Having brought about the state of dynamic equilibrium, let your eyes be at least partially open. Let all the muscles around your eyes soften, and vacantly rest your awareness and your visual gaze in the space in front of you. By so doing, you will begin to sense there's a greater experience of spaciousness. There is not the sense of being inside your head, as can happen when meditating with closed eyes. You open your eyes so that you're totally aware of spaciousness. Nothing closed. Space is everywhere, and the experience of your heads consists simply of tactile sensations arising in the space of awareness. Let your awareness continue to rest right where it is, relaxed, still, and clarity. Then, without deliberately paying attention or giving any special interest to any of the 5 sensory domains of experience, and while resting in the stillness of awareness, peripherally and deliberately be aware of the movements of the mind, as if viewing them from afar. Dajjim Lingpa gives the analogy of a cow herd watching his cattle move. Stand up, sit down, and play around without controlling or identifying with them. So you don't have to stop your thoughts. If you're thinking, I've got to go to the shops after this, I've got to go to bed after this, I need to do this, I need to phone so-and-so, just let them be completely and totally like you're watching your cattle move. You are a cow herd, but you're not touching them or identifying with them. Likewise, observe the movements of the mind, come and go. Simply note appearances and movements arising in the space of the mind. Note them just enough not to be moved by them, drawn into them, and then carried away to their reference. Distinguish between the stillness of your awareness and the movements of your mind. Let anything that comes to mind simply be. Release any impulse to modify, terminate, perpetuate, identify, or appropriate any activities of the mind. Just view them as if from afar, like watching clouds form and then dissolve back into the sky. Discerningly observe, but without judgment. without deeming anything as good or bad. It doesn't matter what your thoughts are saying. Don't label them good or bad. Just let them be. Observe these appearances without preference, as none of them can harm or help you in any way. Do not identify with them as mine, appropriate them or reify them. Don't make them solid as if they exist by their own nature from their own side. They are merely appearances. They do not exist in and of themselves. They are like appearances in a dream. View them for what they are. Observe mental events as mental events. They are empty, so view them as such. Sustain this flow of mindfulness, of bearing in mind the sheer luminosity and cognizance, the beautiful colors and the knowing of your own awareness, the self-knowing awareness. Bear in mind this as continuously as possible. Secondly, bear in mind the movements that arise within the mind. Continue this unbroken flow of mindfulness. Also monitor the flow of mindfulness with introspection, by which you are able to observe whether the flow of mindfulness has been diverted and you become distracted, or your attention has been carried away by excitement. As soon as you introspectively note that scattering and agitation have occurred and awareness has been set in motion, let your first response be to loosen up and relax in body and mind. And as Dajjal Rinpoche said, lower your gaze if you are agitated. Relax deeply and rest in your natural state. If you still find your awareness being tugged or drawn away, then release the grasping and identification with whatever captured it. Once you are a free agent again, return to the present moment, to the awareness of awareness, and just note the movements of the mind once again. Monitoring the flow of mindfulness with introspection, recognize as quickly as you can the occurrency of laxity when you just let yourself identify with it, and dullness when the clarity of your awareness is dim. You need that clarity and that luminous knowing all the time, all the day. When you note that you've descended into laxity and dullness and lost clarity, then arouse your consciousness, invigorate your awareness, and focus single-pointedly. I would say move a little bit. Move your hands if you're getting into a sleep or getting dull and lax. Move a little bit is okay. Just keep sustaining that awareness. Restore the flow of mindfulness and do so with the intention to remain in that flow. In these two ways, you will balance the sails of the mind by remedying the two extremes of excitation and dullness, laxity, and will thus make your mind serviceable. Note how aware you are. Bringing this meditation session to a close, conclude on the note of how I have a sense of balance and well-being, the emotional balance free of laxity and excitation. He calls it conation. I'm giving you the explanation. Recognize that through offering and receiving such teachings and engaging in such practice, there is virtue and merit. Goodness is stored and restored. Direct this merit to the fulfillment of your deepest and most meaningful aspirations right now. This is 2026. What are my aspirations for this year? Put them into practice now. Make it short and sweet, whatever your aspirations are for this year. But really feel them in your heart. What you want for this year. Feel them. Dedicate the merit from this practice to your own enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. The Bodhisattva's dedication, and to whatever else you find most meaningful. If you're needing your work to improve, then make that in your aspiration. But whatever you ask for yourself, don't forget to ask it for all sentient beings who are in that same situation. So I'm gonging you now. You won't be able to hear it, but we'll get the gong fixed. So that's just one tiny meditation of Alan Wallace. He's got about 20 of them. And as I said, you can go to his website and get them verbally done, or you can use them from here. But you know what? As I'm giving it to you, I'm thinking to myself, it's just that little training that we don't have the discipline to train. Just imagine if you're in a situation where somebody is really being negative to you and you don't take it in as though you were really hurt and as though you wanted to retaliate. Imagine you're just looking at that being and thinking, like, how sad it is that you have this need to desecrate me, or to whatever you're doing at the moment. You actually feel total compassion. It doesn't even touch anything in you because you know it's not what it seems to be. That's how you start the conduct, because how this actual lecture started for me, as usually they do start in a funny way, is that I came to the chapter in this book, How a Buddha Conducts Himself. Then I wrote at the top of the chapter, every word of this for teaching. Okay, that's how it came to me. I thought, if whoever gets my books, and if you see how many I've got and how happy I am to have them, you'll be horrified with me, because I love them, because everything I now want to look up, I've got. Whereas for the last year, I wasn't with any of my books. So I just know where I've put all of them, and I just go to have a look at what a master says about that particular subject. Okay, so I wrote there every single word of this, and that's where it started coming to me. And then this morning when I was doing my prayers, the one thing, and yet, and then the one thing that came to me about the Buddha's behavior is compassionate, and skillful means. Now, what does that mean? Compassionate and skillful means. It means when you're looking at somebody and you feel a great compassion and they are really doing wrong, you find a skillful means to actually show them where they are going wrong. That's what the Buddha did. So in that beautiful story, I think it was Sarasvati that was arguing, one of the two bodhisattvas were arguing with each other. And they said, how come the Buddha's here, but the world's not pure? Look at it, it's really impure. Okay. And they went to the Buddha. The one said, no, I think it is pure, we just can't see it. And then they went to the Buddha. They asked him who was right. And what the Buddha did with his skillful means was, he just clicked his fingers and suddenly they were all standing in his pure land. Okay, amazing experience. And they all went, oh, because they saw the very world they were standing in. If they could see it properly, this is how it would look. And so, because they were so shocked about it, they really felt absolutely inadequate. And then he said, is it the fault of the sun if you can't absorb its light rays? Whose fault is it that you can't see this beautiful land? And when I do my prayer to be reborn in the copper-colored mountain, which is inside you, it says there, the copper-colored mountain, that is how did it put it? That is like our Saha world. The Saha world is the samsaric world. It's like the Saha world. Okay. So actually the copper-colored mountain and the Saha world of samsara are one. It's just either you see it like that or you see it like that, but you're already in it. Please remember this from today. It's so important what I'm saying, because I've got such beautiful, beautiful teaching here. And what Dajjal Rinpoche says, he advises that when you want to see it, it's a profound, radical not doing. Write that word down, not doing. Okay, not doing. Inactivity. How can it be inactivity and it still works? We taught by our mothers, don't sit there, get up and do something, bake a cake. Don't just sit there, you go and do it. Your mother, Ika, says, get up and tidy the house, go and do this, go and do that. We've got that in our minds all the time. And here is Dajjal Rinpoche saying, I want you to have profound, radical not doing, inactivity. Now imagine if inactivity produced the most wonderful results, because your inactivity allows that mind of the awakened mind to work through you naturally, spontaneously, and effortlessly. But our constant doing, getting, fixing, analyzing, fixating stops it. We don't stop in stillness to let it come through and express itself in a pure, luminous way. Now, I've got to page 3, ladies and gents, and I've got about 11 pages, so we've got a lot to do. But we're not in a rush, are we? You know what, Bern, what I really want to do, even though I was doing questions and answers on the second session, I just want to get this teaching going before we just have a question and answer. I'd rather have questions and answers in the teaching so that next week we go on. But formulate your questions. Ask me either on WhatsApp or come here and ask them. Don't let this awful voice keep on going, teaching you. I want to hear your comments. Like, Karen, you've got lots of beautiful things to say. We didn't get to the Trekcho and the Togel. All right, let's dedicate, Bern, and then we'll carry on with this next week with part 2, because I think it's too important to just have questions and answers. I think there's lots of stuff to discuss, so let's just do it. So we dedicate for all the people that were in the Sydney terror things, and especially for all the people in Iran, the thousands that are fighting for freedom, that have been annihilated. Now they want to do executions, and it's just horrific. So we dedicate, if there's anything here that people can have, may all those that have died in tragic circumstances just go straight to the light. straight to the light. And also the lady who used to live in this house, who sold it to her, and whose children made her leave and go off into a retirement village, she died last week after about 3 months of being out of this house. So kind of feel also that I'd like to dedicate it for her, because I hope that she had this beautiful place that she's given to us, and now I hope that she can just go to the light, and all beings can. Through this merit, may all beings attain omniscience. May all obscurations fall away from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may all beings be freed. Sonam die tamche zipane, topne nepe dranam pamshene, jegana jibalak topaye, sipe sole doa dro warsho.